the writer's agent is, or manager is often the first stop to placing an announcement. Does UTA have a criteria for when to place an announcement and when not to place an announcement? And is you or someone like you at one of these people's agencies the person to call? Do they discuss it with their agent? Do they come to you together? What role do you play in placing announcements?
If you have representation, if you're at a big agency, you should, by all means, try to get to the me of whatever agency you're represented by. If you're a smaller agency, they may not have a dedicated PR person such as myself, but your agent or manager may have a relationship at the trades and will be able to do something, hopefully. And the question was, when is the time to go?
Yes.
Immediately. Immediately.
What do you do?
In fact, before a deal is closed, you should have the conversation with your agent or your agency's PR person. And I have to be honest, agencies have a different PR approach in terms of what they're willing to do for their clients. UTA is 16 years old. It started out as two agencies merging that were both literary agencies, so we're very sort of writer-centric, and my department makes a big deal out of, trying to make the most of stories for our clients, writers, anyone, but we're particularly fond of making sure writers get their due. And so if you can engage your representation in that dialogue of, hey, how are we going to handle the press on this deal, get them thinking about it, and then you'll have to make your own decision of whether or not your representation is sort of in there enough on it, or whether or not you need to take matters into your own hands. You have to be mindful, if you're doing a deal with a studio, that it's usually, as Dana said, the first person to get to her, or any reporter at the trades, has a fair amount of leverage, because they can sort of get the story looking their way. But you have to remember, the studio, as the buyer, has a lot of say on whether or not the story's even going to run right away sometimes, or who else. They may want to wait until more elements become part of the story. So you need to take advantage of getting the dialogue going as soon as possible with whoever's going to help you get to the trades and do that story. Oh yeah, well I think the process of hiring a publicist is the first step in sort of a long-term strategy. You want to help a client find a publicist that they will work with, and again, you have to realize you hire a publicist and you may only need a publicist for 2 or 3 months during the rollout of the film. But if it's a good relationship, you may work with that person year after year after year, and that conversation that goes on between the publicist and the writer and their agent, their manager, I mean, that's something that you'll begin a dialogue with all those people that will sort of take you down the road, and you'll all decide to make the right strategic decisions about projects and announcing projects and when to announce projects, and it all works together somehow. But I think that's a step that comes a little bit down the line, is hiring a publicist. Again, you may start, your first thing may be having your first trade story, your first spec, or your first pitch or something. You want to make sure that that's right, and you may have a couple of trade stories before a project's actually going, and then once a project's going, you may not have a publicist while the film is in production. But if the film is in production, you should definitely find the unit publicist for the film and have a conversation with the unit publicist for the film. And often the film's on location. If you're the writer, you should be on location at least part of the time. Find the unit publicist, have a conversation, offer up you as a story, but be smart about it. What is your news? What's your what's the story? Publicists and journalists especially, they're looking for news. They're looking for a story. They're looking for news. And it's not news like, your sister had twins. They're looking for, how are you part of how this movie came together, and what the impact is, and, for a project like Andrea's, World Trade Center, I mean, getting 18 calls after a story's announced is unusual, but that's because, obviously the context of that deal was huge.
My first inkling that I might be a publicist was in July of 2005. It was announced in Variety that my movie was being greenlit with Oliver Stone and Nick Cage and the subject matter, and literally within 10 minutes I was out of town. I called into my home answering machine, and on my home answering machine I had messages from the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times. It was like 18 messages from different publications, and I didn't know what to do with that. So that was my first inkling that I might need some assistance in sort of navigating those waters. And UTA, Chris, helped me to help set up a bunch of meetings with different publicists around town, and I went and, much the way that you go on agent meetings, you have to make sure that you feel like you can work with that person, and that they get what you want out of the relationship. For me, I was not looking to have my face plastered everywhere. There were very specific things that I thought she could help with, such as helping, with this huge onslaught that I was totally unprepared for, helping, making sure that I didn't get lost in, having such a big director, a big movie star, that my side of the experience didn't get lost. There were specific things, and so found a great woman, Bibi Lerner, who was supposed to be here this evening, who really helped guide me through the whole maze of everything.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your working relationship and how she made sure you didn't get lost?
Sure. Well, I mean, she worked, really hand in hand with the studio, and so when she would find out that events were going on, or really, it wasn't like she was jumping all over the studio. It was really important also to me. I actually had called the studio at one point before I hired her and said, "I'm down to these 2 people. What do you think?"
That's a really good
because I wanted them to work in conjunction. I didn't want her stepping on their toes or vice versa. So we did that. And so she would find out that, okay, the junket is going to be on X day. She made sure that I was there, and then made sure that, if I was already going to be in New York, I would do 10 more interviews with New York-based press. She just really, at every sort of stop along the way, the international DVD release, which happened Valentine's Day week, I did about 20 phone interviews all over the world. She knew that was coming. She let them know I was available for interviews, that sort of thing.
Did she do any media training with you? Did they do any media training with you?
Not a drop.